over.
Cool. Welcome. Thanks for showing up to the Saturday morning first talk today, or after the keynote. Today we're going to talk about how compliance doesn't have to suck, or at least totally. This is something that we've been talking about for the last 3 years, about. Generally in this office, turns into good intellectual debates, ends up with you're dumb. And that's pretty much how all of our conversations end up. But what you're going to learn is, this is Rob Carson. He's the Director of Security for Sherwell Software, Chief Nerd Herder, and he's the compliance guy. So,
obviously. All right, and this is Brad Stine. So Brad Stine is a security consultant, so he's pen tester, incident response, secures things by breaking things. So he's the hardcore security guy. So him and I have had multiple debates, but we've also been through 2 ISO certifications, the 2005 and the 2013, as well as PCI. So we've done the compliance battle over the last 3 years quite a bit. Next slide. So, initial implementation. So, this is incredibly accurate. How many of you guys have actually gone through an ISO certification or a compliance certification? So those that have, it's painful. When you first start off, that initial implementation is kind of like boot camp. You go through it, you start off pretty weak, you finish boot camp, you're a lot stronger than you were, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily a trained operator.
And if he ever comes to you and says, we're going to surge for 3 months to get this compliance done, laugh at him. He's lying. It'll never end. So one of the things that I find as a consultant, I travel, talk to a lot of companies that are going through this process. They're either trying to get certification or they're maintaining. But one of the biggest problems that I see is checkbox security versus risk-based security mindset. And basically what that is, you know, we're either trying to fill some sort of audit checkbox, or I actually am looking at risk. If you're talking about ISO, you're talking about some of the other compliances, you know, there is a risk management piece in there, but people don't use it. It gets overlooked. It's just like, yeah, we got a risk-based policy. Check. Great. But are you actually using it? Is that how you're making the decisions for what security controls you actually need? And when you start talking about some of the other compliances that you need to have security controls around data loss prevention. Well, what exactly does that mean? Is that just a DLP solution? Or is that a data classification that then you can find through all your products, something like Titus or whatever, you know, security products you need? You know, so it's not just hey, I've got a data loss prevention solution. It truly is, I'm trying to protect data loss, and these are the security controls or technologies that build that security control within my environment. The other part is the business requirements have to be met. You know, I talk about compliance, and it's, you know, when we're talking about it, it sucks. That's not the business requirement. Yeah, it's you know, it could be for PCI, you know, we have to do this. There's reasons behind it, but in the end of the day, if the business can't run, it doesn't make the widgets or the money that it does, we don't have jobs. So we have to be thinking, you know, very thoughtfully about making sure that the business requirements are met. So, and I don't know how many here are pen testers, red teamers, security people. You know, when I hear the last couple conferences and the keynotes and stuff like that, one thing that keeps coming up is automating the pen testers. I feel like there's a lot of companies out there that are producing, quite frankly, shit. And if we are going to deliver a product or a report to you that is a checkbox type report, that service is useless. So when I'm doing a pen test or when I'm going in and working with a company, you know, I want to see them through. I want to see what the root cause is. For example, the keynote yesterday, you know, they were talking about the patches, right? Patch management, everything else. You know, I come in, I compromise the system based on patch, you know, an exploit, whatever. The underlying root cause is not the patch, right? It's your patch management. How did that system, how is that system in your environment still today and it's not patched? I come in 6 months, I find a different patch that's missing, right? That's the root cause. It's not the actual patch that is missing. So, you know, working with the customers and expanding what we do, I think is very important to provide a service that, can't be automated, can't be, it's not just something that everybody can do. Or, a lot of people can do it, but it's not something that can just be used lightly.
All right, so training. So one of the things Brad brought up was the pen testing. So one of the things, train the right staff with what they need. So when you have a compliance standard, hey, I have to have an annual security assessment. So you can check the block and have a security assessment. They come in, scan, okay, great. They tell you something you pretty much already knew. Or what I do is I hire a company to come in and do purple team, train my team, so then when we do the red team assessment, we're actually a lot better at it, as opposed to just checking the block. That's one of the tricks to compliance is the standard says this. Nothing says you can't go past that standard, okay? Just because you meet the standard. That's what's great about ISO. That's what some of the other ones that demands continual improvement. So train the right staff with what they need. In-person training and make it applicable. So, and depending on the size of your corporation, how feasible this is, I understand. What we do currently is you come in, you get your initial online training, that's great. But when I do the annual training, things like that, get in front of people, talk to them, talk to the business, understand what their needs are, making sure you're not breaking their business processes, work with them to come with the solution, and train them on the standard and what it means, and removing all that mystery about it. Get the standard in front of them. Say, hey, these are the clauses we have to meet. Let's figure out a solution to this. Some of these compliance standards, if you look at FedRAMP, it's a little more prescriptive. ISO, you have to meet the compliance standard. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it exactly the way the book says. You have options there, which is a great thing.
So one thing to add to that, I think that what do you think about the online the modules that go out for the SANS trainings and stuff like that?
What?
The SANS trainings where it's just, hey, do you know how to set up a password? Do you, just the basic security 101 needs?
I think it's okay. I like in person.
Okay.
I think the SANS stuff is great, but I think anytime you can get in front of people and get that face so they understand who security is, what they're there, and they're not there. They're a force for good, not a force for evil, not to lock them down like it's Fort Knox. We are here to make money. We don't do security for fun. We do it because we're here to protect revenue and make more, right?
Yep.
Change management. So when you go through that initial implementation, especially if you're at a smaller company, it's a lot of fun, right? Because you got your IT manager. He's great. He's like, why do I got to log all these changes? Like, who cares, right? Well, if we don't have the log, one, we can't prove what changes we made, but two, it also forces that check of, hey, you're going to bring the system down. Did we tell the users that we're going to be taking the system down? It's amazing how many times I've seen some of my own staff occasionally, not at the company I'm at now, but at different companies, doing something on a holiday weekend thinking nobody's going to be online, no one will notice. But you always get caught, right? So change management. Organization needs to implement change management. Organizations need to baseline their systems. And being able to audit the unauthorized configuration changes. Being able to figure out what's going on in your system so you know, hey, you made these changes, that makes sense. How did this change get done? And that's how you can start, improving your security, looking for those vulnerabilities, those anomalies that are existing.
I'm just going to add to that as an instant responder. When you have your systems basically logged and we know what kind of configurations you have, it makes life easy, right? So when I'm in there or somebody's in there and you now have a new service that's started up, you've got security configurations that have been maybe disabled, the logging, we could see that, hey, somebody's been messing with this. We need to investigate who and when this has been changed. When you don't have those things baselined or even documented, when I'm in there, is this a standard? Is this how you normally set up? Configuration is huge for making your IR response, efficient.
And one of the things that we didn't talk about a little bit on change management is when you're implementing your compliance standard and you're defining what change management is, make it simple, okay? If you need a change control board, have a change control board, but don't necessarily restrict yourself in your SOPs that you have to have the change board. The change board's there to discuss stuff, but if you can approve stuff via email through an automated system where you just click approve, you type in approved, there's nothing wrong with that. Make it simple. That's one of the best things I can tell you is having been through multiple certifications and seen other companies do it, keep it simple. Write down what you actually do, not what you think you should be doing to start. You can improve that process later, but write down the simple answers right off the bat. Don't make it so hard that you can't, it's this albatross that you're never going to be able to prove.
So compliance fails. Well, to be honest with you, I think there's a lot of places that compliance fails. But let's start with policies for the sake of policies. You know, I know when I first was working with Carson and we're going through our first ISO, there was policies that just didn't make sense. There was policies for policies about policies. I swear, it got ridiculous at some points, and I'm the one writing this. So why the hell am I writing this? Make sure that your policies have a purpose. Make sure that they're clear. One of the things that I learned from Carson, and I think it's his military background, is the work instruction versus a policy. I think that's very important. Do you want to go into?
Yeah. So the policy, that's the high-level policy. And one of the things is you don't have to have a policy document, an SOP, and a work instruction. You can have a SOP with a policy statement right in the front. So you don't have to have this big paper tiger of 1,000 pieces of documents you got to update and maintain. But the work instruction, the great thing about the work instructions are your screenshots, but there's nothing wrong with referencing the manual. Okay? That can be your work instruction. That passes compliance. Here is how we do it. We follow the book. That's it.
The next one is policies that don't make sense. I've heard about a password policy that's eight pages. Great dissertation, but really, what the hell can you have in an 8-page policy, password policy? But the other things, I know that there's been times where, I think Carson himself even put, what's the difference between a smartphone and a tablet? If you're not allowed to have a tablet in an organization, but I have a smartphone, it's the same thing, just a little bit smaller. So, make sure that your policies make sense. Make sure that they're like he was referring to earlier, that you can follow them. You make them so difficult. You have people like me in your organization, I'm going to go around them. I mean, I'll be straight up. I am that person that, you have to make it simple and make it make logical sense. Or, you're going to have somebody that's technical that's going to be able to get around the security controls. So organization stopping once policy is drafted and implemented. This is something that I find when I do security reviews for a lot of companies. We've got a system in place. Great. Haven't touched it since? What do you mean? And basically what I'm talking about is are you tuning? Are you looking at your security controls to figure out how to make them more efficient? Are you automating them? Are you integrating these systems to make your job easier? Well, what I've seen or what I hear is, we've got this security control. It's bringing so much more work. I'm getting flagged. I'm getting notifications. I don't have all the time in the world to get to these. Okay. I understand that. What is your process for reducing the false positives? What is your process for identifying what you need to be looking at versus noise? How do we silence that? Are you actually doing the tuning process? Do you have integration points where, say, if I got a vulnerability scan program, right, and I have high-level vulnerabilities, well, I really don't need to go and send it through 3 people to get it approved. I can just set up an open ticket to integrate it so that my system will automatically create a ticket to the IT staff and then go through the change management process to get it implemented. So you can automate it so that way you're not having to be that central chokehold going forward. Again, we want to make this easy. We're swamped. We're all swamped as security professionals. So we have to make this thing automated as we can. And just because the security technology is implemented doesn't mean that we're safe. My last job, I had to do a cybersecurity annual plan, which is great, and I had acquired one from my predecessor. And basically, in it just said that we have a strong perimeter. Great, I got a strong perimeter. That means nothing. Let's look at the last type of vulnerabilities, your endpoint, the malware, the stuff like that. Once you're inside, you've got all the information, no segmentation. Great. So, implementing these technologies, you can be compliant, have everything there, and it doesn't mean shit if you're not following through and trying to make these things secure.
Compliance wins. So.
Never happens.
It can. Trust me. So one of the things that I can tell you, having been through these things, so the difference between having a crap security program and a good one is when the DSS changed to 3.0 and one of our customers required us, hey, we got to be PCI compliant, we did it in 3 months. Why? Because we had a mature security program where we had to, 80% of it was done for us. We had 20% to meet some specific PCI controls that were a little different than what we had. So we had to do a few little things, update a little bit of documentation, do a little more segmentation, and we were on our way. Compliance wins. So baseline those security controls. If you have nothing, compliance is a good thing because at least it forces you to think about the entire environment, all the way from physical security to onboarding, offboarding, all those great things. Addressing the people and process of security. And that's one of the best things. You know, a lot of times you'll start off with a policy that says this is how you do things. And you may have to roll out a technical control later to enforce it. But the nice part is if that policy is already signed off, you don't necessarily have to get permission to enforce the policy that you've already written in and had approved. It's a great thing about it. So ISO, I like ISO from the fact that it mandates continuous improvement. I think it's a great baseline foundation. NIST, you know, FedRAMP, so those standards, what's great about them is they have some more specific controls, but if you're starting, ISO is a great place to start and then add on those controls that are specific to what you need to do. You know, the NIST standards are great, but the great thing about ISO is it doesn't require you to do, it doesn't have the exact specific guidance that like NIST does where it might, or FedRAMP, we got to have a 14-character password or something like that, which is actually a good thing, but you may not be mature enough for that yet. Some organizations, mechanism for budget. So the way I build my budget, here's the business process, here's the risk, here's what I'm doing to protect that line of revenue. It's not based off of, well, the Chinese might get us. Well, the Chinese are always going to come after us, right? So it's based off of what business process I'm trying to protect, what revenue I'm trying to protect. That's how I base my budget. So that's how all of my controls are built, and that's how I justify my budget. One of the things that I'll advise you to, automate. So buy a password management, or not password management, an SOP management software, okay? There's multiple things out there. The idea is that you can easily track your compliance. You do not want to be tracking approval for SOP via email. Trying to prove that to an auditor. I've seen companies do that. Horrible. Don't do that. Yeah.
Cool. Blanky light security. That's generally what I see when we're going to go look at a compliant place. So the next one is how I fuck up your compliance. Not just as a red teamer, but as maybe an system admin person. One of the things that I find is, especially when I'm doing a pen test, is patches and configurations are not verified. Just because you push out a patch doesn't mean the system took it. Has the server been rebooted? Has it, you know, have you checked to see if that vulnerability still exists? I still find Heartbleed. I still find you'd be surprised. This is something that is all over the board. Doesn't matter what type of compliance you're with, maybe no compliance. If you don't have a mechanism to verify that your patches and your configurations have taken, you're probably vulnerable. Changes in the environment are reviewed. So I don't know how many people do a lot of development, sysadmin work. If I revert a snapshot, right, after patch Tuesday, I now have an unpatched server that I just reapplied into my environment, right? So these are the things that we have to look at. We have to understand what the risks are for certain types of configurations or changes in the environment. I know that as a security person, I don't have the ownership of the IT, you know, the availability, uptime, and everything else. So I can't always force that. However, you know, as a security person, I need to know when those changes happen so that I can, at that point, maybe re-push out those patches or ensure that the configurations are right, or maybe just do another scan against that machine to make sure, you know, they didn't open up Telnet or something stupid. Finding exceptions to the policy. First of all, I want to say I always like to be exception to the policy. Carson will know that, you know, I started working with him, and I was like, so you can either give me admin rights to my box on a separate account, or I'm just going to pull them off my box. Either way, it doesn't matter. I'm going to have it. So how do you want to do this? And
I was going to add, so one of the tricks too is when you have those battles, like let's say you got a bunch of developers running Macs, right? And you're like, oh, we got to standardize this. Sometimes the best thing to do is to buy them a Mac, so at least it's your Mac that you control and not their personal device running corporate data, okay? So choose the battles that you got to have and figure out what the risk point is. Is it better for them to have at least your Mac that you make sure they have malware on, and you don't have someone? I had one company, I had a board member tell me, this is like a year ago, oh, I've got a Mac, I don't need malware protection. Sir, that was 10 years ago at best.
So finding exceptions. I also look for them when I'm doing a red team engagement. So I'm going to go for your CEO, right? Because they're generally laxed. They have access to a lot of things, and they're going to get around a lot of the security controls because they just don't want to be bothered. So these are definitely weaknesses that you're going to have in your environment. Limiting the scope. Going on engagements all the time, people limit the scope. Oh, these are our compliant boxes. This is what we have. Well, great, but I'm going to put malware on your endpoint and then just laterally traverse into it. So it's one of those that, hey, you got to be careful. I would include everything as much as you can. Granted, when you're starting out, I know that you don't want to just throw the kitchen sink at it and be like, oh shit, we're going to be compliant with everything. And make sure your security controls are being monitored. The nice thing is, as a pen tester, I can be noisy as hell, and most of the time, people aren't looking. There's very few shops, minus government and stuff like that, that are actually looking. So we just, monitor the tools that you put in place. So the last one is, can't we just get along? As you can tell, we have to work together. We have to come together and make things happen. Otherwise, we're going to make the entire thing fail.
Yeah, and one of the best and most important things is understand the control and don't make it bigger than it has to be, okay? So figure out what the control is and start simple at first. The other piece that we didn't talk about is work with IT. So IT is the one who actually gets the stuff done, right? They're the ones who actually put your stuff in. So work with them. Understand that their primary objective is uptime and availability. Understand their needs and figure out their cycle so you can work with that to accomplish a heck of a lot more. Because IT wants to secure the environment too, because they don't want to have to rebuild the network after an attack. But at the same time, work with them. And then, true security makes compliance easy. So the objective I always have whenever I'm at a company is the audit week, whenever the ISO auditor's in town, that is the easiest week of the year because all I'm doing is having catered lunches and showing them all of our great stuff. That should be the easiest week, not the most stressful week of your year, if you're doing it right. One of the things that I would recommend too that I've learned from painful experience, if you're an implementer, if you're a project guy like I am, hire a security administrator that handles all the check block stuff, making sure that you do everything as you're moving fast through your environment. See if you can get somebody that that's really anal and will be like, hey, we didn't fill this form out right. Those are important things to have.
Cool.
Any questions?
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Done.